We're considering 13 bills that will update our laws governing the satellite industry and promote the cybersecurity of our communications networks. We must make sure our laws keep pace with advancements in technology and allow innovation and entrepreneurship to flourish. The Satellite and Telecommunications Streamlining Act and our other satellite legislation will give regulators the tools they need to ensure our rules don't hold back American ingenuity. We must also make sure the United States and our allies enhance their participation in international standards setting bodies to lead on the development of new international standards rather than having them dictated by the Chinese Communist Party. As technologies advance, so do the attempts by bad actors seeking to hack our networks. Improving cybersecurity literacy will help protect our data and make our networks more secure. Overall, I'm grateful for and applaud all the bipartisan work on these communications and technology solutions as energy and commerce leads the way to improve our nation's connectivity, network security, and maintain U.S. leadership in wireless technology. From the Health Subcommittee, we're taking action to address the illicit fentanyl crisis, protect the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, and stop discrimination against people with disabilities. More people than ever are dying of illicit fentanyl poisonings. As many parents have appealed to us, this requires urgent action. Moms like Molly Kane deserve justice. We must secure the border and make sure law enforcement has the tools they need to seize fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances. That is why we are advancing Representative Griffith and Latta's Halt Fentanyl Act and Representative Lesko and Miller-Meek's bill, the Securing the Border for Public Health Act. DEA testified just last month that permanently scheduling fentanyl-related substances in Schedule 1 is their #1 legislative priority. And in our field hearing in McAllen, we all heard and saw why. The Securing the Border for Public Health Act would expand current Title 42 authority to be used to stop the import of certain controlled substances, including fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances. I want to be very clear. President Biden cannot let the emergency scheduling expire, and it should not lift Title 42. I also want to recognize Rep. Harshberger for leading on the Block Report and Suspicious Shipments Act. The opioid epidemic was fueled in part by suspiciously large shipments of controlled substances being delivered across the country, especially in the Appalachian region. This bill would help stop this practice and save lives by requiring drug manufacturers and distributors that discover a suspicious product to stop the order and report the information to DEA. Additionally, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline suffered a cyber attack and was shut down for several hours late last year. This lifeline is a critical tool that provides support and hope to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. Thank you, Rep. Obernolte, for your work on the 988 Lifeline Cybersecurity Responsibility Act. It requires coordination and reporting to improve cybersecurity protections for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. We're also taking action today to ban the use of quality-adjusted life years, or QALYs, and other similar measures by state and federal government health care programs. More than 70 disability and patient organizations agree that QALYs are discriminatory and have no place in our decision-making. The federal government can evaluate the effectiveness of treatments and cures without devaluing the lives of seniors and people with disabilities. We've worked tirelessly with the minority and with CMS to get the bill right. We've resolved every outstanding comment from the agency and worked to address the concerns by the minority. I hope that we can come together with a strong vote to affirm the dignity of every person to receive life-saving and quality care. Finally, we'll consider H.R. 1603, the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act, which will repeal harmful policies from the IRA intended to incentivize states to impose natural gas bans through building codes. It will stop the administration's forced electrification agenda that will mean fewer choices and higher energy costs for all Americans. As you can see, we have a robust agenda this afternoon. Thank you all for being here, for your work. It proves ENC is plowing the hard ground to deliver results. I now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, the committee will mark up 19 bills, some I support and others I will oppose. I'm pleased we're considering 13 bipartisan bills that advanced out of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee earlier this month, including the 2 satellite bills that Chair Rogers and I have been working on since last Congress. I look forward to these bills advancing out of the committee today and reaching the House floor in the near future. We will also consider H.R. 467, and I continue to have significant concerns about the bill, which now expands mandatory minimums for fentanyl-related substances after adoption of an amendment in the Health Subcommittee. This is a significant departure from the Biden administration's proposal to address FRS, which includes guardrails to ensure that we're not exacerbating inequities in our criminal justice system while permanently scheduling FRS. Unfortunately, Republicans refused to work with me on the necessary guardrails to improve this legislation and to actually work on something that I think would have a chance of being signed into law. I also have strong concerns with H.R. 801. This bill is a misguided expansion of Title 42 authorities and goes beyond the purpose and intent of the statute, which is to stop the spread of communicable disease. It's also a major expansion of executive power that would broaden the conditions where the executive branch could unilaterally shut down trade, immigration, and travel to this country. I urge my colleagues to oppose this anti-public health and I believe anti-immigrant proposal. On H.R. 485, it's unfortunate that we've not been able to reach an agreement. This is discouraging as my staff and I have worked in good faith on this bill, but I need assurances that nothing in the legislation would go beyond banning the use of QALYs or could be used to delay or disrupt the implementation of the drug price negotiations and the Inflation Reduction Act. It's disappointing that the majority is moving forward with a partisan amendment. And lastly, we'll consider H.R. 1603, the so-called Homeowner Energy Freedom Act, and this bill repeals the popular home electrification grants that will give customers immediate off-the-top discounts for electric appliances. It also repeals funding for energy workforce training and building code adoption. We haven't had any hearings or stakeholder testimony on this bill, but we know it's a terrible idea. These are popular incentives that will save consumers money and are urgently needed to help us fight the climate crisis. This bill has nothing to do with freedom. It's about keeping customers, especially low and middle-income customers, tethered to expensive and volatile fossil fuels. And I'll have more to say on several of the 19 bills throughout the markup, but for now, Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognize Mr. Latta for 5 minutes, opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Today's full committee markup includes 13 bipartisan pieces of legislation that the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology advanced unanimously out of the subcommittee 2 weeks ago. I want to thank the members on both sides of the aisle for their work over the last several years on the legislation we're voting on today. It's essential we bring our satellite laws and regulations into the 21st century, especially as we compete against other countries like China, who seek to dominate the United States. In the communications and technology legislation we are considering today will promote innovation in satellite technologies and enhance cybersecurity of our communication networks. First, I'm proud to be leading one of the bills before us today with the gentlelady from Illinois, the Precision Agriculture Satellite Connectivity Act. Our bill would require the Federal Communications Commission to look at its rules and submit recommendations, if any, on how it could update its rules to promote precision agriculture to help our farmers increase productivity and improve efficiency in their operations. We will also consider H.R. 1338, led by our chair and the ranking member of the full committee, the Satellite and Telecommunications Streamlining Act. This is the first legislation in decades to modernize the laws and regulations governing the satellite communications industry. H.R. 1338 would require the FCC to establish a streamlined framework to license commercial satellite communication services. This is important legislation which will unleash American innovation, bolster U.S. technological leadership, and protect our networks from bad actors. Next, we'll be marking up legislation that would facilitate reliable emergency services utilizing partnerships between satellite companies and terrestrial networks during times of emergency, streamline the process for using spectrum for launch and re-entry of commercial space vehicles, and ensure that satellite technologies used by Americans are secure. These measures will help usher in new capabilities that will make a difference in Americans' daily lives. I commend the leadership of my colleagues on this committee for leading on the solution to advance next-generation satellite technology in the United States. Further, we'll consider 8 additional bills that advanced out of the Subcommittee on Communications 2 weeks ago that will improve the security of our communication networks and supply chains. In addition to the C&T bills on today's markup, we'll be considering 5 health-related bills, including my legislation with my friend, the gentleman from Virginia, the Hart-Fentanyl Act. I want to thank all the members for their hard work on these members, and I look forward to advancing them swiftly to the floor. And Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Matsui for 5 minutes, the ranking member. No, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support all of the communications and technology bills especially, and they've been all bipartisan. I'm proud to support them. Thank you. Going back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Guthrie, Chairman of the Health Subcommittee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The health care legislation before us today will help Americans live longer, healthier lives. This includes cracking down on illicit fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances that are threatening lives of tens of thousands of Americans. H.R. 467, the Halt-Fentanyl Act, introduced by Representatives Griffith and Latta, would permanently schedule fentanyl-related substances as Schedule I drugs. Further lack of permanent action only emboldens those trafficking these toxins into our communities. Ms. Lesko's legislation to secure the Border for Public Health Act would address illicit drugs. This would expand current Title 42 authority to allow Secretary of HHS, in consultation with the Attorney General, to prevent the flow of certain controlled substances in the United States and protect our nation's public health. Also strongly support Representative Harshbarger's legislation, the Block Report Suspend Suspicious Shipments Act. This will require drug manufacturers and distributors to report all suspicious orders of controlled substances to the DEA and require these entities to decline to fill such orders. H.R. 498, the 998 Lifeline Cybersecurity Responsibility Act, introduced by Representative Obernolte, will address cybersecurity vulnerabilities with the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline system. Finally, we are considering Chair Rogers' H.R. 485, the Protecting Healthcare for All Patients Act. This would permanently ban the use of quality life adjustment years in all federal health programs. These discriminatory measures reduce access to potentially life-saving treatments for vulnerable populations, such as people living with disabilities. I urge the swift passage of these pieces of legislation, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. No other opening statements? Oh, Chair recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, Ms. Eshoo, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Today we're marking up 19 bills with 13 bipartisan bills originating from the C&T subcommittee that'll modernize our communication networks and secure the U.S. satellite industry, including a bill I've sponsored, the American Cybersecurity Literacy Act. I'm pleased to support all of them. Excuse me. We're also considering 5 bills originating from the Health Subcommittee, 2 of which are bipartisan bills, the Block Reporting and Suspend Suspicious Shipments Act and the 988 Lifeline Cybersecurity Responsibility Act. I'm very disappointed that we didn't get to, yes, a bipartisan agreement on a third health bill, the Protecting Healthcare for All Patients Act. Excuse me again. Republicans and Democrats were able to reach agreement on banning the discriminatory measure quality adjusted life years, or QALYs. But it's my understanding that when trying to clarify what non-discriminatory cost-effectiveness measures are allowable, the agreement fell apart. I still think, Madam Chairwoman, that we can get there. So I think if we want to successfully pass a law banning QALYs, that there be a consideration to pull that bill today so we can continue negotiating and vote once we reach a agreement. If we do that, but if we go ahead, I'm going to abstain on voting on this bill today because, again, I believe that negotiations should continue. So as we move along through the rest of the bills, I'll comment on them. But the disability community, and you know this, Madam Chairwoman, and all the members of the committee know this, this has been a huge issue for the disabilities community for a long, long time. And I really want to see us on a bipartisan basis get this over the finish line. So with that, I'll yield back and the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back, and I appreciate the work that's been done on the quality legislation specifically, and we'll continue to work to hammer out the language. Chair calls up H.R. 1338 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1338, a bill to amend the Communications Act of 1934 to provide authority for certain licenses and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill is open up for amendment. At any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
For what purpose does the gentlelady seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1338, offered by Ms. Matsui of California. Strike all after the enacting clause.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm offering this amendment to Chair Rogers and Ranking Members Pallone, Satellite and Telecommunications Streamlining Act. This aims continues our subcommittee's bipartisan work to keep America at the forefront of the competitive satellite marketplace. For the United States to remain the global leader in satellite technology, we need a licensing regime that is nimble and responsive to the market. The reforms established in the SAT Streamlining Act, which are enhanced by this amendment, would do just that. Thanks to the ongoing feedback of the FCC and satellite companies, this amendment makes clarifications that will enhance the bill's effectiveness and ensure it can be implemented quickly. The bill will provide new authority to the FCC to grant licenses for GSO and NGSO satellite services and authorizations for Earth stations. This authority would provide more predictability in the licensing process for companies currently navigating a complex and often lengthy process. It would also require the FCC to act on new license applications within a defined timeline to ensure innovators in the United States can keep up with their peers abroad. The SAT Streamlining Act also requires the FCC to issue rules within 18 months to establish performance objectives for space safety, good faith coordination requirements, clear grandfather protection rules, and foreign ownership guidelines. This amendment would ensure these rules are consistent and workable. We're at an exciting time in the development of satellite technology. Advances in broadband, imaging, and satellite to mobile communications hold the potential to better serve consumers and boost innovation. So, Madam Chair, I offer this amendment that advances the goals of the SAT Streamlining Act and continues our committee's bipartisan work in this space. I urge support for the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair would like to recognize herself for 5 minutes to speak on the amendment. We began this effort to develop a new satellite licensing framework fit for the 21st century nearly 2 years ago. We've worked with a wide array of stakeholders from the satellite industry and heard witness testimony to inform our efforts, and I'm pleased that we finally are at the point of advancing this important legislation out of the full committee and move it to the floor. American innovators continue to blaze the trail in developing new satellite technologies, and last week's satellite show confirmed why it is important to update this framework now. It will lead to more innovation, more competition, and better service for American homes and businesses. Since our efforts began, the FCC took notice and has started to lay the groundwork to implement certain provisions required in the SAT Streamlining Act. I want to thank Ranking Member Pallone and all the stakeholders for working with us over the last few years to create a framework with competition, innovation, and predictability in mind. I encourage my colleagues to vote in support of this legislation, and I yield back. Does anyone else seek recognition on this amendment? Okay. Seeing none, the question now occurs on approving H.R. 1338. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll. Oh, on the Ains, I'm sorry. Okay, where did I miss that? Okay. So seeing no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there further amendments? Seeing none, the question now occurs on approving H.R. 1338 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. Deget. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer.
Aye.
Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagan. Badagan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
How is Mr. Cardenas recorded?
Mr. Cardenas is not recorded. Mr. Cardenas votes aye.
Mr. Bilirakis, how is Mr. Bilirakis recorded?
Mr. Bilirakis is not recorded. Bilirakis votes aye.
Buddy Carter, Representative Carter?
Carter is not recorded. Carter votes aye.
How is Mr. Curtis recorded?
Mr. Curtis is not recorded.
How is Ms.
Curtis
Harshberger?
votes aye.
Thank you. How is Ms. Harshberger recorded?
Harshbarger is not recorded. Harshbarger votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 44 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. The chair calls up H.R. 675, as forwarded by the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, and asks the clerk to report.
Committee print of H.R. 675, as forwarded by the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology on March 8, 2023. To amend the Secure and Trusted Communications Network Act of
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Mr. Pfluger, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee print for H.R. 675, offered by Mr. Pfluger of Texas.
The
Strike
clerk will
all after the
suspend
enacting clause
with
and
the
insert
reading.
the following.
Without objection. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Pallone, for both of you for your leadership on this bill and in advancing America's interest in satellite communication technologies. I'm happy to introduce this bipartisan amendment in the nature of a substitute to expand the national security protections in the bill to blanket licensed earth stations. This amendment would prevent the FCC from being able to grant licenses or market access for entities held or controlled by those who have proven to be malign actors. Given the rise of trusted leading American companies like AST Mobile from my district, we must create an environment where America can continue to lead in space tech and bad actors cannot use satellite communications networks to undermine our interest. I believe this bill will do just that. Once again, I'd like to thank the chair and the ranking member for your leadership on this critical issue and for pushing our agencies to move at the speed of relevancy. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? The ranking member, Mr. Pallone, is recognized for 5 minutes to discuss the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you and your staff for working with me on this legislation. The bill extends the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act framework to the commercial space marketplace. Specifically, it will ensure that satellite communication systems serving the U.S. market are not owned or operated by entities identified as threats to our national security. It's critical that we do everything we can to keep the prying eyes of our adversaries out of our communications networks, which is why I'm glad we're moving forward on this bill today. I would urge my colleagues to support the AINS and the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments? Seeing none, the question now occurs on approving H.R. 675 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. Degette. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagan. Badagan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Are there any other members seeking to be recorded? Okay. How is Mrs. Harshberger recorded?
Mrs. Harshbarger is not reported. Harshbarger votes aye.
The clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 46 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1339 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1339, to require the Federal Communications Commission to review certain rules of the commission.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Seeing no discussion, the question occurs on approving H.R. 1339 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Palmer. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. Degette. Schakowsky. Aye. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Aye. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Aye. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Seeking to be recorded. How is Ms. Barragan recorded?
Ms. Barragan is not recorded. Barragan votes aye.
The clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 46 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 682 as forwarded by the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology and asks the clerk to report.
Committee print of H.R. 682, as forwarded by the Subcommittee of Communications and Technology on March 8, 2023. A bill to facilitate access to electromagnetic spectrum for commercial space launches.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Dung, seek to be recognized?
Move to strike the last word, Madam Chair.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I applaud Mr. Soto and the bipartisan common sense work that we have done together on this Launches Communications Act. It's imperative that the United States continue to lead in satellite communications technologies and space exploration to ensure our global competitiveness. In today's world, indispensable spectrum knows no boundaries, no borders. It must be distinctively used to enhance space and satellite operations, provide broadband access to our fellow Americans, enhance the United States' security capabilities, and more. As our essential private sector partners continue to innovate, the federal government can play an essential supporting role through the modernization of the launch, spectrum, and licensing process. Through federal coordination with the private sector, America will continue to innovate and will be better for it. The Launch Communications Act is a step forward for space launch and re-entry, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I look forward to this bill's consideration on the House floor and beyond as we seek essential spectrum allocation for space launch and re-entry. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Are there bipartisan amendments to the bill? Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Soto, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
To move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for agending this critical bipartisan bill. Thank you, Dr. Dunn, for the bipartisan partnership that we have. Through Kissimmee, we see the busiest spaceport in the world, in Cape Canaveral, with 57 launches last year in 2022. This year, we expect 87 launches. So sometimes we see 2 or more in a week. And so when we see bad weather, some of these can really start stacking up, which is why having to have an FCC license for each launch could be cumbersome. So this bill will make sure to streamline that process, and it's also critical to support the future of American space leadership. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion?
Yes, there's an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you. Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee print for H.R. 682, offered by Mr. Soto of Florida.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of the amendment.
Madam Chair, this amendment makes 3 minor changes, giving FCC authority to adjust the spectrum authorizations via rulemaking, clarifies that NTIA can nullify FCC authorizations to prevent interference with federal systems, and clarifies that it doesn't eliminate the special temporary authority. It provides a streamlining process to not have to use it if you so choose not to as one of our commercial space companies. And I yield back.
Okay. Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Question now occurs on approving H.R. 682 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Rogers. Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamek. Kamek votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes aye. Eshoo. Eshoo votes aye. DeGette. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagan. Badagan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye. Carter is not recorded. Carter votes aye. Mr. Ruiz is not recorded. Ruiz votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Dr. Burgess recorded?
Dr. Burgess is not recorded. Burgess votes aye.
Are there any other members? The clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 46 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1353 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1353, a bill to direct the Federal Communications Commission to issue rules for the provision of emergency connectivity service
Without
and for other
objection, the
purposes.
first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk. Kim Schreier.
Thank you. Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 1353, offered by Ms. Schreier of Washington. Strike all after the enacting clause and
Without
insert the
objection,
following.
the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute to mine and Mr. Johnson's bill, the Advanced Local Emergency Response Telecommunications, or ALERT Parity Act. This amendment incorporates some technical changes and adds a report to this important legislation. One of my priorities is to ensure that all people have access to emergency services during disasters, no matter where they are. We're seeing devastating wildfires in the West, including in my district. The Cascade Mountain Range runs right through my district, and increasing natural disasters puts my constituents at risk of landslides, fires, snow emergencies, and more. Mount Rainier is also in my district, and small towns in the area around the national park depend on recreational hikers feeling safe and visiting often to boost their economy. But my constituents who live there really need consistent access to emergency services. I hear stories about visitors getting in a crash and having to hitch a ride down to the nearest town just to make an emergency call. That's what we want to prevent. So many homes have a landline because of this, and this adds to household budgets and anxiety. So this is why I'm thrilled that the ALERT Parity Act is on the docket for this markup. This bipartisan bill I introduced alongside Representative Johnson will help alleviate some of these concerns and make sure everybody has access to emergency services in their district. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Is there further discussion of the amendment? Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes on the amendment.
Chair Rogers, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
I thank my colleague, Representative Kim Schreier, for offering this amendment in the nature of a substitute for the ALERT Parity Act, which I'm very proud that we have sponsored together. As you've heard, this bill would require the FCC to issue rules within 18 months of enactment to establish an application process for entities seeking to provide wireless emergency alerts and 911 service in unserved areas. It also requires the FCC to establish service rules whereby providers of emergency connectivity service may access spectrum held by a licensee so long as it does not cause interference to the licensee. This amendment, in the nature of a substitute, further refines the bill text to reflect bipartisan discussions and stakeholder feedback. The amendment clarifies that carriers must provide voluntary express written consent before providers of emergency connectivity service may access their spectrum. And while voluntarily, I strongly encourage our carriers to participate once the FCC establishes rules, as this is a process designed to provide life-saving access to 911 and emergency alerts in locations where cellular service is either unavailable due to an outage or the customers in an unserved area. The amendment also includes a reporting requirement. The FCC must provide an annual report to this committee as well as the Senate Commerce Committee detailing instances where emergency connectivity service was provided by this program, and also each instance when an entity authorized to use spectrum declined to provide the consent needed by providers of emergency connectivity service to use their spectrum. This enables Congress, and specifically this committee, to provide oversight of the program and ensure that this legislation is implemented as intended. As I've stated before, every person, every American deserves access to emergency assistance, period. And this is a priority to my constituents in rural Appalachia who lack a reliable cellular connection to reach help, oftentimes when in distress. This bill is very narrow in scope, and I encourage my colleagues to support it to ensure everyone has access to emergency services regardless of where they live or travel. Thank you, Chair Rogers, for including H.R. 1353 in today's markup, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? There's no further discussion. The vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Question now occurs on approving H.R. 1353 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller-Meeks. Miller-Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. DeGette. Schakowsky. Aye. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Aye. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Aye. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagon. Badagon votes aye. Blount Rochester. Blount Rochester votes aye. Soto. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Are there any other members seeking to be recorded? Madam Clerk, how is Dr. Burgess recorded?
Dr. Burgess is not recorded.
How's Dr.
Burgess
Dunn?
votes aye.
Thank you. How's Dr. Dunn recorded?
Dr. Dunn is not recorded. Dr. Dunn is not recorded. Dunn votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Soto recorded?
Mr. Soto is not recorded. Soto votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 46 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1345 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1345, a bill to amend the National Telecommunications and Information Administration Organization Act to establish the Office of Policy Development and
Without
Cybersecurity.
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purposes does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman, Mr. Curtis, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I speak in support of my bill before us today, the NTIA Policy and Cybersecurity Act. The NTIA Policy and Security Act will refocus the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to ensure they are working to better secure the communications technology industry. State and non-state actors are working overtime to find vulnerabilities in our networks and infrastructure. We must work even harder to ensure that Americans are protected from cyber attacks. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this bill, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? Seeing none. Question now occurs on approving H.R. 1345 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller-Meeks. Miller-Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshoo. Eshoo votes aye. DeGette. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagon. Badagon votes aye. Rochester. Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Any other members seeking to be recorded? The clerk will report.
Madam Clerk, on that vote, we have 44 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1354 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1354, a bill to require the Secretary of Commerce, acting through the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information, to report on and develop a whole-of-government strategy with
Without
respect to
objection,
the
first
economic
reading of the bill is
competitiveness.
dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill?
Madam Chair,
For what purpose does Dr. Joyce seek
I
recognition?
move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes. to
Thank
strike
you,
the last-
Chair Rogers. Briefly, I want to offer my support for the legislation H.R. 1354, the Information and Communication Technology Strategy Act, which was introduced earlier this month. This bill will direct the U.S. Department of Commerce to analyze and recommend a whole-of-government approach to identifying and securing critical communication network equipment. It will build on previous work from this committee, ensuring that there are alternatives to nefarious actors like Huawei and ZTE, known CCP-supported businesses. In light of our earlier hearing today, ensuring that our domestic networks are safe from bad actors like the CCP is absolutely paramount. Further, this bill requires the Department of Commerce to provide an update to Congress on the resources necessary to fully source our broadband infrastructure from allies and domestically, thereby making it more difficult for foreign adversaries to interfere in the American telecommunications network. As spectrum and broadband technologies continue to advance, the United States must remain the global leader who invent, build, and deploy high-speed and reliable devices to facilitate internet access. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the question occurs on approving H.R. 1354 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller-Meeks. Miller-Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshoo. Eshoo votes aye. DeGette. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye. Dunn is not recorded. Dunn votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how's Ms. Kamick recorded?
Ms. Kamick is not recorded. Kamick votes aye.
Any other members seeking to be recorded?
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 48 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Clerk calls up H.R. 1370 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1370, a bill to direct the Federal Communications Commission to establish a council to make recommendations on ways to increase the security,
Without
reliability.
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Seeing none, the question occurs. On approving H.R. 1370 as amended, a recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber.
Yep.
Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. Deget. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blount Rochester. Blount Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye. Dunn is not recorded. Dunn votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Ms. Deget recorded?
Ms. Deget is not recorded. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky is recorded as aye.
The clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 49 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. The chair calls up H.R. 1360 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1360, a bill to establish a cybersecurity literacy campaign and for other
Without objection,
purposes.
the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill?
Madam Chair.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, seek to be recognized?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Madam Chair, I am proud to speak in support of my bill, H.R. 1360, the American Cybersecurity Literacy Act,
And I'd like to thank my bipartisan co-sponsor, Representative Eshoo of California, for introducing this bill with me. I think most of the people in this room are aware that most Americans display an almost stunning ignorance of the basic precepts of cybersecurity. And if you want proof of that, consider the fact that the most currently used password in the United States is the word password. In second place are the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This bill would improve that situation in small part by instructing NTIA to develop and administer a cybersecurity literacy campaign. This campaign would educate Americans of basic cybersecurity principles such as the need for secure passwords, the benefits of multi-factor authentication, as well as the common ways in which malicious actors exploit the digital data and cybersecurity vulnerabilities of Americans to cause havoc and in ways that do their cybersecurity harm. So this would be a small drop in the bucket for educating Americans on their cybersecurity needs, but I think would be a very meaningful step in that direction. I was pleased to see it pass unanimously out of subcommittee and would respectfully ask for your support. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion on the bill? Gentlelady from California is recognized. Ms. Eshoo is recognized for 5 minutes on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to strike the last word. I think Mr. Obernolte has described the bill well, so I won't go through all of it, but I think it's important to underscore why we introduced this. And I agree that there is a high level of ignorance across the country on how to secure what we have. So the bill directs the NTIA to provide information about common cybersecurity risks, but most importantly, identify the best practices to mitigate those risks. It's needed in the country. So I want to thank Mr. Obernolte, Chairwoman Rogers, Ranking Member Pallone for their partnership on this legislation, and ask all of my colleagues to vote for it, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Seeing none, the question now occurs on approving H.R. 1360 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshoo. Eshoo votes aye. Degett. Degett votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blount Rochester. Blount Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Any other members seeking to be recorded?
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 49 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up HR 1340 and asks the clerk to report.
HR 1340, a bill to provide outreach and technical assistance.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson, seek to be recognized? Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see H.R. 1340, the Open RAN Outreach Act, before us today. This increasingly globalized market for telecommunications equipment and services poses new challenges, particularly for ensuring the security of our supply chains. This bipartisan bill would direct NTIA to provide outreach and assistance to small network providers to support the development of a competitive market for trusted, secure network equipment. This assistance will help them find components from trusted vendors, helping to secure the entire network. This will be especially useful in rural areas where network expansion is desperately needed, but must be done without sacrificing security. I want to thank the chair for scheduling this bill. I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Allred and Chairman Guthrie, for leading this effort with me. And this time, I'd like to yield to Chairman Guthrie.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding. The Open RAN Outreach Act further builds on our efforts to strengthen our supply chain and ensure untrusted equipment is kept out of American telecommunications networks. This bill requires NTIA to support the implementation of Open RAN technology for small and rural providers if they would like to deploy this technology. Promoting a more competitive market of trusted alternative vendors remains an important component in the strategy to protect U.S. networks. This helps the U.S. compete against China and provide 5G equipment. And I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the bill? The question occurs on adopting H.R. 1340 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamek. Kamek votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. DeGette. DeGette votes aye. Schakowsky. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Are there any members? Madam Clerk, how is Ms. Shirkowski recorded?
Ms. Schakowsky is not recorded.
Schakowsky votes aye.
Schakowsky votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 49 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it. The amendment, the bill is adopted. The chair calls up H.R. 1343 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1343, a bill to codify the Institute of Telecommunication Sciences and to direct the Assistant Secretary of
Without
Commerce
objection, the
for
first reading of the bill is
Communications.
dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Well, for what purpose does the gentleman, Mr. Carter, seek recognition?
Asked to speak on the bill.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 1343, the ITS Codification Act. As our committee examines how federal and commercial spectrum is allocated, it's important that NTIA and FCC have the information necessary to do their jobs successfully. Within the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, and the Institute for Telecommunication Sciences, ITS, which is essential to informing important spectrum policy decisions. Spectrum management decisions made by NTIA rely on complex technical radio frequency testing and analysis conducted by ITS, and therefore we must strengthen its statutory authority to ensure it continues to do so. This bill also directs ITS to support the development of emergency communication and tracking technologies for locating trapped individuals in confined spaces. This is an important initiative that has the potential to protect and save American lives. I'm confident ITS will continue to contribute to innovative advancements that are crucial to our global competitiveness. Last Congress, this bill went through regular order and enjoyed unanimous support on the House floor. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the question occurs on adopting H.R. 1343 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshu. Eshu votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Badagon. Badagon votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Oh. They may be in the back. Okay. Are there any members? Okay, clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 49 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up HR 1377 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1377, a bill to direct the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information to take certain actions.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purposes does Mr. Wahlberg seek to be recognized?
Madam Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, I'd like to thank my caucus, the 5G and Beyond caucus co-chairs, Representative Dingell, Representative Johnson, and Representative Custer, for joining me to reintroduce this legislation promoting U.S. Wireless Leadership Act. It will advance American in its standard setting for 5G and future generations. It encourages participation by U.S. companies in international telecommunications standard setting. And H.R. 1377 will ensure a unified approach to push back against the influence of international competitors. And so I thank my colleagues for pushing this forward. I encourage support for this, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, yes, no. The question occurs on approving H.R. 1377 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the vote. The roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. 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 Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. DeGette. DeGette votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Any members? Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Armstrong recorded?
Mr. Armstrong is not recorded. Armstrong votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 50 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1341 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1341, a bill to improve federal coordination.
Without objection, the reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Gentlemen, for what purposes gentlemen seek recognition?
To explain the bill, Madam Chair.
Mr. Balderson is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I again would like to express my thanks to Representative Custer and to all my colleagues on the subcommittee for advancing this legislation by a vote of 26-0 earlier this month. Spectrum is at the center of all modern wireless technology. Cell phones, radio, television, Wi-Fi, and other modern technologies rely on access to spectrum. Timely coordination between the FCC and the NTIA is critical to ensuring spectrum is being used efficiently. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the question occurs on approving H.R. 1341 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the vote.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson.
Or TikTok, Twitter.
Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Fluger. Fluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks.
There's several.
Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. DeGette. DeGette votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Veazey. Veazey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Barragan. Bardagon votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 49 ayes and 0 nays.
The ayes have it. The bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 1603 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 1603, to repeal provisions of Public Law 117.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purpose does Mr. Duncan seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word to speak in support of 1603, the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill removes 3 provisions from the Inflation Reduction Act to restore consumer choice and ensure home energy costs do not put home ownership out of the reach for many Americans. First, the bill eliminates the high-efficiency electric home rebate program. The $4.5 billion program would only allow rebates for qualified electrification projects that are limited to electric heat pumps, electric stoves or cooktops, electric load service centers, insulation, air sealing, and electric wiring. The aggressive push toward electrification ignores the household energy needs of Americans, including the significant number of households that rely on natural gas for heating their homes and cooking. U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that in 2020, 61% of U.S. households used natural gas in their homes. In both Ranking Member Palone's home state of New Jersey and Subcommittee Ranking Member DeGette's home state of Colorado, more than 80% of households consume natural gas. The same percentage holds true for the state of California, the state of Illinois, the state of Michigan, the state of Utah. Rather than subsidizing electrification with billions of taxpayer dollars, we should give Americans the freedom to decide if installing electric appliances makes sense for them and their family. The Homeowner Energy Freedom Act also rescinds the state-based home energy efficiency contractor training grants. This frivolous provision of the Inflation Reduction Act directed $200 million to provide training education for contractors involved in home electrification projects. This legislative text specifically points to providing training so that contractor employees can install the energy efficiency electrification improvements under the high-efficiency electric home rebate program. This is just another example of the Democrats' hasty rush to electrification. Finally, the Homeowner Energy Freedom Act strikes assistance for the latest and zero building energy code adoption. This provision from the Inflation Reduction Act allocated $1 billion and grants to states and local governments to adopt specific energy codes for residential and commercial buildings. Specifically, the $1 billion was broken down into $330 million to adopt the latest building energy code and $670 million to adopt zero energy codes. A one-size-fits-all approach to energy codes ignores the regional differences, including local energy mix and weather-related needs. According to data of the state energy code adoption managed by the Department of Energy, 27 states have code efficiency levels equivalent to the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code or older, and 7 states do not have any statewide energy code for residential buildings. Forcing states to adopt specific building energy codes without requiring states to share a portion of the cost is also fiscally irresponsible. We should not force states that have taken a different approach, residential energy efficiency, to adhere to a single national building energy code standard, which is the ultimate goal, I believe, of the Biden administration. Americans deserve choices, especially when it comes to the comfort of their own homes, and I urge my colleagues to protect energy freedom for homeowners across the United States. Support 1603, and I yield back.
Castor. Gentleman yields back. Does anyone seek to be recognized?
Madam
For what
Chair.
purpose does Ms. Castor seek recognition?
Strike the last word, speak in opposition.
Gentleladies recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill repeals 3 of the key provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act that help to lower costs for families all across the country. First, the High Efficiency Electric Rebate Program, which will help families electrify their homes through point-of-sale rebates. The Electric Efficiency Contractor Training Grants that will provide training and education to contractors on electrification. And third, the assistance for the latest and zero building energy code codes to support state and local communities and their ability to adopt and update building codes to help lower costs and reduce pollution. All three of these initiatives support residential energy efficiency, reduction of greenhouse gas pollution. They will help our neighbors cut their energy bills, their utility bills. In fact, according to Rewiring America, at least 85% of households in the United States, about 103 million, could save $37.3 billion a year on their energy bills if they're using modern, electrified furnaces and water heaters instead of their current machines. The savings are biggest for the 64.9 million American households across every county who are currently using electric resistance, fuel oil, or propane. And that Rewiring America estimates that those homeowners could save almost $500 per year on average. Of the households that save 44%, are low or working class neighbors back home. And each year they would save an average of $377. Many would save up to $493 per year on average. These provisions were designed directly to lower cost in the short term, help people afford the new appliances, and then help you save money in the long term as you have lower electric bills. I was home last week, or actually it's Thursday already, talking to neighbors one-on-one in town hall meetings, and to a person, they're all worried about the affordability squeeze. How can Congress help put money back into their pockets? Well, these are how we do it, through these provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's really, this is another bill I see as the Republicans really side again with big oil and gas to the detriment of the people we represent, putting the profits of polluters over the interests of the public. And what's even more distressing is that you're trying to sneak it in here. This didn't go through regular order. There was no hearing on this. You bragged last time about the bills on how, we had regular order, we had hearings, we heard from witnesses. In this case, we didn't have witnesses, did we, to testify about, well, is this a good idea, is this a bad idea? Because it's a bad idea. So instead of working together in a bipartisan manner to put forth legislation that would improve the lives of everyday Americans and help our neighbors back home lower costs, lower their utility bills, they're once again putting profits and polluters over the people once again. This bill is not protecting everyday Americans' freedom, but rather the freedom of big oil and gas to gouge us. I urge my colleagues to vote against this legislation, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word, please.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm incredibly disappointed that we are considering this bill today. The majority has stated time and time again that they are committed to regular order. But we had a full committee hearing on energy issues, and I don't remember the provisions covered by this bill being mentioned. We also had a joint legislative hearing of 17 bills. This bill was not included. And we had an energy subcommittee markup, and again, this bill was never discussed. I think it's fair to say this bill has not been examined by the committee. Had it received proper consideration, there would have been no shortage of stakeholders telling us that repealing these sections of the Inflation Reduction Act would be indeed unwise. We could have heard from some of the thousands of contractors and small businesses that are going to be able to train their workforces to do energy-efficient retrofits with the funding provided by the IRA. We could have heard from states and territories and tribal governments explaining how they are working hard to be prepared to implement these funding opportunities. And we could have heard from consumer groups that could explain the benefits of these funds, including how much money Americans can save on their energy bills by utilizing the rebates included in the IRA. Just to be clear, states are not required to accept this funding, but they would be foolish not to. These funds are going to help train the workforce needed to retrofit homes. This is a critical industry across the country, employing millions of Americans, and 75% of the efficiency workforce is employed by small businesses with less than 20 employees. Similarly, the rebates are completely voluntary. They would not prohibit anyone from continuing to use existing gas, propane, or fuel oil equipment in their given homes. They would simply allow low and moderate income homeowners to have more of a choice. These rebates will help low-income Americans offset the upfront costs of a new qualified heat pump, water heater, and clothes dryer if necessary. In addition to electric appliances, these rebates can also support insulation, air sealing, and electrical panel upgrades. And please don't just take my word for it. I want to request unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to enter a letter opposing this bill from nearly 200 businesses, trade associations, environmental advocates, energy efficiency advocates, and contractors and small business owners, including the Building Performance Association, E4 the Future, the Alliance to Save Energy, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and the National Association of State Energy Officials. Again, asking it to be
Without objection, so
entered into
ordered.
the record. Thank you. We have heard so many times about supporting low-income Americans by improving energy affordability. We have heard about the need to grow small businesses in the energy sector. This bill runs counter to those goals, which should be bipartisan. We know this bill is already part of H.R. 1, so today's inclusion in this markup is just basically theater. And I strongly believe that the Senate will reject this proposal. But given how this bill will undercut states, small businesses, and low and moderate income families, I must urge its rejection. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Seeing none. The question is on the passage of H.R. 1603 as amended. A recorded vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye. Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Dunn. Dunn votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Fluger. Fluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes no. Eshu. Eshu votes no. Deget. Deget votes no. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes.
No.
Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark. Clark votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Dingell. Dingell votes no. Veazey. Custer. Custer votes no. Kelly. Badagon. Badagon votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. Craig votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Fletcher votes no.
Oh, Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Veazey recorded?
Mr. Veazey is not recorded.
Aye. Or you're a no.
Veazey votes no.
Keep my mouth shut.
Our side voted. Yes.
Clerk will report.
Madam Chair, on that vote, we have 27 ayes and 22 nays.
The ayes have it and the bill is adopted. Committee stands in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.